Part 48. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 477. It's so embarrassing. The fat man pursed his lips at this time. I think it's better not to hold on anymore. It would be better to pass out. At this moment, the fat man even spoke a few words more fluently than before. If he hadn't been so convinced of this guy's character, other people wouldn't have shed tears, but the warm current in his heart still stirred up. Definitely. Get up and walk by yourself. You are so heavy, you can't let me carry you. Subai touched his pocket, took out 2 cigarettes, and bit them both in his mouth. He used one hand to block the wind and the other to use a lighter to light it. Then, he held one cigarette and brought it to the fat man's mouth. The fat man sighed, bit his cigarette, and then stood up staggeringly. Dabai, it's true that this hurts me, it's not fake at all. Subai didn't say anything. In fact, whether it was the fat man or the young man surnamed Joe who instigated the incident, since the young man surnamed Joe agreed, it was obvious that he had this idea. After all, doing the battle method during teleportation for the formation master, his hands and feet were like dancing in his own home court. It couldn't be easier. The fat man actually helped him. At present, the young man surnamed Joe and old Shen are left underground. After the formation is cut, it is basically impossible to use it a second time. Where are we now? Subai asked. In Tibet. How big is Tibet? The entire region covers an area of 1.20223 million square kilometers. So do you think your answer just now is nonsense? Shanghai, known as the Magic City, has a permanent population of nearly 30 million. Therefore, this is a city where land is at a premium. It is not surprising that housing prices in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou are rising continuously. The reason is that they can attract people from all over the country continue to flock here, and the rigid demand here has always existed. In comparison, the inflated housing prices in some other second and third-tier cities in China seem a bit insincere. Of course, the reasons for this are also well known. Secret. Wenya Garden is a high-end housing area mainly composed of villas. Ordinary people cannot live here. In the past, some businessmen even used the fact that they own a property here to show their financial strength when discussing business. Although with the new development of real estate in Shanghai in recent years, this place has lost its former reputation, but the housing prices have not depreciated at all, and continue to rise following the trend. However, when evening came and some owners were driving home, they found many police cars at the gate of the community. I refused to answer all these calls. Chu Zhao reached out and scratched his hair. He was very angry now. The tragedy of a family of 5 being exterminated happened right in front of him, and the dignitaries living in this community, but they kept using their relationship to signal the police to keep the noise down, as if they were playing an influence game. It's a pity, not to mention that Chu Zhao himself is a second-generation police officer and has a very hardcore. Besides, as an audience member, he still continues to work as a police officer, and he has a very free and easy attitude. My attitude and identity are different, and my mentality is naturally different. I am just playing the game The Sims. Let's hold a press conference, Chu Zhao said. But, a press conference, a policeman on the side said in surprise. How many massacres of a family of 5 people can happen in a year, not just in Shanghai, but across the country? Chu Zhao directly grabbed the policeman by the collar and scolded, this case has been going on since the beginning. The confidentiality was not kept well. Now the news must have spread. If our police don't come forward to issue a report now, it will definitely cause panic in the society. It's none of your business that those bastards worry about the appreciation or depreciation of their own properties. Even if you hold this position for the rest of your life, you won't be able to get this house, right? No, I'm sorry, the little policeman was frightened and immediately apologized. Chu Zhao let out a heavy breath and looked at the broken winged bat painted in blood on the wall, as if with a strong sense of ridicule. A family of 5, all died at the dinner table. The hostess, 2 sons, and a daughter were all nailed to death on the dinner table with knives and forks. The muscles on the male host's back were torn open and bloody, they were stabbed with knives, forks, and chopsticks. It stands there like a pair of fleshy wings. Instinctively, Chu Zhao smelled an unusual scent. No suspicious fingerprints were extracted, and the sound security system did not detect the entry of any suspicious persons. This family of 5 should have died 3 days ago. The food on the table has spoiled, if it were not for the nanny who works 2 days a week. I came to work this morning and opened the door with my room card. It is estimated that in a few days, the bodies of this family of 5 will be completely decomposed. Because although it is winter now, the heating system in the house is very advanced, which also creates more suitable conditions for the body to decompose. Taking out his mobile phone, Chu Zhao dialed Sunar's number. "Hello." Sunar answered the phone. "She should be driving." "Has he come back?" Chu Zhao asked. "Him? I don't even know where he lives now." "Why, you're actually looking for him?" Since Subai moved to Lao Fang's house, he deliberately didn't tell Sunar the address. "I have a case here, and I want to hear his side of the story," Chu Zhao explained. Haha, Sunar obviously didn't believe it. "Don't have any other ideas? Last time he just beat you up. Next time, he might really kill you." One code equals one code. Chu Zhao seemed very tolerant at this time. "My fault used to be my fault. I admit it, but now I just want to ask for help as a policeman and I don't know if I can still be regarded as a friend." He came over to help me take a look. After all, Shanghai is also his home, isn't it? This is not like your style of painting. Sunar stopped the car and held the phone to his ear seriously. "Tell me, has something happened to you again? It's not like you or I suddenly had an epiphany, which is why my character has changed so much. An old friend is back. I've talked a lot with him these past 2 days and thought about some things," Chu Zhao said. "Old friend? Who?" Sunar suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Gufan. Chu Zhao said these 2 words. "I talked with him about the radio broadcast." "Is he, also an audience member? Do you believe it? Before we formed the murder club, Gufan, he was already an audience. The little guy can already start walking on his own, which is a very gratifying thing for Subai. Nothing can make a father happier than seeing his son making progress and growing up day by day. Be careful and let's go." In the living room, Subai squatted on the ground and clapped his hands at the little guy. The little guy waddled up to Subai on his little feet, and then threw himself into Subai's arms. "Ha ha ha, great, great." Subai picked up the little guy. The little guy who had just learned to walk seemed very excited. He had been playing with Subai in the living room for half an afternoon. At this time, it was really time to take a rest. After getting milk and some snacks that children like for the little guy, he placed him next to Ji Xiang and let him watch TV for a while. Subai turned around, took the newly delivered flowers, and left the living room. In the bedroom, the monk and Gyatso were still lying on the bed. It had to be said that even though the 2 monks had turned into a vegetative state, they looked very good. They had replaced the vases in their bedroom with fresh flowers. When he walked out of the bedroom, he met the fat man coming out of his bedroom. "I found out, those llamas are in France now," the fat man sighed. "They ran so far, damn, if we hadn't been trapped underground for so long, they might not have had time to escape." It took Subai and Fatty about a day to find a small town in the vastness of Tibet. When they returned to the canyon where they started, it was another day later. After searching twice, they could not find the llamas. Later, I went to Gyatso's holy temple to inquire about his whereabouts, and learned that the group of lamas and a large group of disciples had evacuated collectively, and it was not as simple as evacuating slightly and going to Asin's place. Went directly to the west. Knowing that their efforts were in vain, the two had no choice but to return to Shanghai. Now, it has been more than a month since they returned to Shanghai. Of course, although the trip to Tibet failed to get revenge, Subai got old Shen's ruler and witnessed the Qin soldiers. At the same time, the tip of the iceberg and the dead princess in the ruler were also of great value. Fatty also got the opportunity to copy the pre-Qin space teleportation circle. The gains for the two of them were still huge, comparable to a story world. I have gained a lot, so I really don't have much to regret. However, the ruler cannot be moved for the time being, because without the formation of the young man surnamed Zhou and the seal of the ruler by old Shen himself, the soul of the princess in the ruler has become unstable. After being brought back to Shanghai, he was directly suppressed by the fat man. Only by visiting Lao Fang's house can everything be ensured. Now it seems that we can only wait until the monk and Gyatso wake up to release the soul of the princess. It's okay, I don't believe they can come back. Yeah, the fat man nodded and walked to the living room, probably to watch TV. Subai returned to his bedroom and planned to take a change of clothes and take a shower. At this time, his cell phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello, Subai answered the phone. Subai, it's really difficult to find your number. There was a very familiar voice on the other end of the phone, and Subai couldn't remember who he was for a moment. Oh, I don't know my brother anymore. Haha, there happened to be a case here at Chuzhou. You should come over and help me. After all, we are also good brothers who used to hang out together. There is no overnight feud. Gufan, are you back? Subai finally remembered who it was. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 478. Fat man, take care of the kids for me, I'll go out, Subai shouted to the fat man while changing his shoes at the entrance of the living room. Okay, your cat nanny is here, but don't worry, I ordered a big meal tonight, and I found that your son likes meat as much as I do, so follow me. The fat man sat on the sofa and put the little guy on, he said with a smile on his lap. That's true, but why does it sound so awkward? Subai smiled, shook his head, and walked out of the room. Lao Fang's house had a garage, but Subai was still used to parking his Pusat on the roadside. Anyway, the road was spacious enough and there weren't many residents around. After getting into the car and starting the car, Subai did not rush into gear and drive away. Instead, he reached out and tapped the steering wheel lightly. Why did you wander here? In the passenger seat of Subai, sat a woman wearing a red dress. The woman looked very beautiful, with a pure aura. A pair of exquisite red high heels made her legs look very slender. What's wrong? Are you so impatient after not seeing your senior sister for so long? The woman said to Subai with a seductive pose. Sorry, I'm not interested in ghosts. Subai frowned slightly. Didn't I put you in the cemetery? Why, are you getting lonely now and want to become a sexy ghost and go out to do things? If I want to become a pervert, will you? I don't have anything I don't want to do, but I have to warn you, in this world, there are really people who are into metaphysics. They may not be taken seriously by me, but I still feel very grateful to deal with you, a lonely ghost. If you are interested, please don't look for me near my house next time. The reason why I sent you out last time was because my cat was not very interested in evil things. This time, you are lucky. If next time if it comes out to bask in the sun and finds you approaching, you will definitely end up in a state of shock. In the beginning, you regularly asked people to burn some clothes and cosmetics for me, but in the past 6 months, you haven't had any. The senior sister said sadly, it makes it so that people can't show off to my neighbors in the cemetery. In the past, I ordered people in the company to do those things. Now that my company is gone and I am a pauper, your affairs have naturally stopped. Subai took out a cigarette. Apparently, young Master Su was already a little impatient. He had nothing to do with this female ghost. When they were in school, Subai had just become an audience member. By chance, one person and one ghost they had some interactions. Later, the female ghost attached to something on Subai's body and followed Subai for a while. However, after Jixiang came, when she approached the female ghost, she was frightened by Jixiang's aura and ran away. After going out, Subai could only relocate the female ghost to one place, which was in the cemetery. It is true that there are auspicious factors here, but there is also another factor, that is, Subai has gradually become stronger by then and does not need to have a female ghost next to him. Okay, I'm not that ignorant. I came to you because something strange happened in the cemetery recently. 7 or 8 neighbors came at once. Moreover, those neighbors are obviously different from our ghosts who are still in the world. The same, they have no intelligence, are lifeless, they should have died miserably, and they were affected by something special. I think they are about to become evil, so I came to you to talk about it. I know, I'm going to the cemetery tonight to take a look. Now, I have some things to deal with first. Subai looked at the senior sister, meaning, you need to know what's going on. I don't dare go back to the cemetery now. If they change this afternoon, I will be torn to pieces and eaten by them. Subai took out his cell phone and dialed Fatty's number. Hey, what's going on? Didn't you just go out? Fatty asked while chewing snacks. Fat man, there is a female ghost at the door. She has something to do with me. Please help me contain her first. Just don't let Jixiang kill her easily. Oh, okay, I'll come out right away. What does that ghost look like? Isn't it beautiful? Subai smiled for a while and hung up the phone. At this time, the senior sister got out of the car and wandered to the door of Lao Fang's house. After seeing the fat man open the door and come out, Subai put the car into gear and left. For Subai now, that person's return is the most important thing. Gufan. There were 4 people who formed the murder club together. Subai, Sunur, Chuzhao, and Gufan. The 4 people have unusual family backgrounds and can be understood as an exciting game organization composed of 4 second-generation officials and rich second-generation people. Among them, Subai has always had an attitude of not caring about anything, while Gufan is obviously very attracted to Sunur. This is something that everyone can see. Later, Sunur was transferred to the Chinese ambassador to the UK due to work reasons. As a military attaché in the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Gufan changed his job and went to a medical research institute in London. It can be said that he was very infatuated. However, when Sunur came back later, Gufan did not come back with him. At that time, Subai and Chu Zhao thought that due to the nature of Gufan's work, they could not leave a research project at will before it reached a stage. But at this moment, he actually came back. While driving to find the gate of the community, Subai couldn't help but stick out his tongue and lick his lips. In the original murder club, Sunur was responsible for collecting information and arranging, Subai was responsible for the main action of killing people, and Chu Zhao was responsible for the aftermath. For the police, Gufan was responsible for the design of the killing method and the selection of the scene environment. The 4 of them had a clear division of labor and worked well together. However, due to Sunur's job transfer and the fact that Subai became an audience member, the club was immediately disbanded, and even the once good friendship faced the embarrassing situation of falling apart. But the most important thing is that 3 of the 4 people are already listeners. So, where is Gufan? Arriving at the entrance of the high-end community, Subai parked the car on the side of the road. Not far away, Subai saw several familiar figures standing across the road, including Sunur, Chu Zhao, and Gufan. Subai opened the door and got out of the car. At this time, a gust of north wind happened to blow up, raising some sand and dust. Sunur and the others obviously discovered Subai, and the 3 of them started to cross the road and walk towards here. For a moment, Subai suddenly felt a little dazed. It seems like I have vaguely returned to less than 2 years ago. At that time, the four of us often got together. Even in the Magic City, the four of them are out and out princesses and prince ceilings, and they are still in the upper reaches of this circle. They can be considered high-spirited and even unscrupulous. Gu Fan walked first, Suner followed, and Chu Zhao walked last. Gu Fan looked as usual, which was exactly the same as his previous appearance, as if time and experience had not left the slightest trace on him. Just like Gu Fan in the past, this person gave people the same feeling. Maybe it was because he was a brain doctor. He always gave people a very calm or even cold feeling. Suner seemed much calmer and no longer as excited as when he saw Subai before. Although the two of them almost had something a while ago, nothing happened in the end. Later, Subai deliberately alienated the relationship between the two. It's impossible for a girl as smart as Suner not to realize that, and we can't help each other, so let's just continue to be ordinary friends. In this world, most of the relationships can evolve into Liang Shanbo and Zhu Yingtai. Most of them are slowly worn away by the passage of time and life, and become unrecognizable even to the parties involved. Chu Zhao was smiling, as if he was not the one who was beaten up by Subai before. The smile on his face was very sunny and heartless, but it seemed a bit artificial. Maybe, he really wanted to turn the page and take this opportunity to repair the relationship between the two people. Maybe, he really didn't have much utilitarianism, but just felt that in the atmosphere of the reunion of the four, maintaining a suitable expression and a suitable attitude is the best choice. Subai took out the cigarettes from his pocket. There were exactly 3 cigarettes left in the cigarette case. Subai took one himself, and then threw the remaining 2 cigarettes at Gu Fan and Chu Zhao. Gu Fan didn't smoke, but Subai and Chu Zhao would give it to him every time they smoked. This time, Gu Fan took the cigarette as before, and then deliberately put it into his pocket with a look of disgust, while Chu Zhao he took out the lighter, lit it himself, and then walked towards Subai to help Subai light it. 4 people crossed a road, finally stood together. Gu Fan put his hand on Subai's shoulder. "Hey, are your hands itchy?" Subai smiled and said nothing. Chu Zhao also smiled beside him and said nothing, while Suner raised his head slightly, as if he was restraining some kind of liquid that might be secreted from his eyes. In the end, it seemed like Gu Fan was talking to himself. It's better to kill someone. Yes, it's better to kill someone. Time seems to have returned to the past. 4 young men and women, all still college students, were sitting by the window in a high-end coffee shop. Subai said that his violent tendencies and negative psychological emotions have become more and more serious recently. Then, Gu Fan, who was sitting next to Suner, immediately reached out to lift the frame and said in a cold tone, "It's better to kill someone." Then, Suner and Chu Zhao also nodded. The murder club was established in that warm and cozy coffee shop with a bit of a bourgeois atmosphere. Only. After taking a puff of cigarette, Subai reached out and gently removed Gu Fan's hand on his shoulder. Then, Subai threw the cigarette butt on the ground, stretched out his foot and stepped on it. He raised his head and blew out smoke rings from his mouth while looking at Gu Fan with an indifferent expression. "Haha, senior listener. Yes. Everything will never be restored to what it was before. Who would have thought that in that romantic cafe, the cold-blooded brain doctor who raised his glasses and said, 'I'd rather kill someone /.' In fact, at that time. Already a listener. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 479. Haha, it's pretty good now. Maybe, this is God's will. Now the 4 of us are the audience, and it seems like we are back to the way we were before, Gu Fan said very freely. Subai had no intention of continuing to reminisce about the past. Thinking about it now, when he first established the murder club, Gu Fan should have looked at him, Suner and Chu Zhao like three silly buns. He was already an audience and had already experienced it. In the story world, life and death are at stake, but in the real world, I have to play a killing game with three children. The people who were killed were all scumbags who had committed sins but escaped legal punishment. Therefore, even if the listeners killed such people, it would not matter. There would be no cause and effect. Of course, it would not be a good idea to gain any favor from the broadcasters. Such a cheap thing. Chu Zhao, you said you would like to see me if you have a case. Is it related to me again? Subai made a double entendre. Chu Zhao pursed his lips and said, I think this case is a bit unusual, so I wanted to ask you to take a look. Don't worry, what happened last time won't happen again. Subai was non-committal. Hurry up then, I have to visit the grave at night. Grave sweeping, Gu Fan said with some surprise, I just came back, why don't we all get together in the evening? Please invite Suner to cook a good meal, and let's have some wine and chat. No, the family is not very close to each other. Subai refused directly. Gu Fan nodded, okay, we are a busy man, so I won't force you. Chu Zhao briefly introduced the situation of the case while leading the three people into the community. This was a tragedy in which a family of 5 was wiped out. A couple, 2 sons no more than 10 years old, and a daughter, 5 people died tragically. At the dinner table. Murders happen at any time and anywhere, and are not unusual. However, every time a mass murder occurs, it is sensational, because if some kind of resentment or some kind of motive can prompt the murderer to kill a whole family, it is enough. Putting nearby residents and even residents of the entire city in danger. The male owner of the deceased was named Jing Qiaovu, and the female owner was Han Yan. Jing Qiaovu was a real estate developer who had risen in recent years. He made a fortune by speculating on land and subcontracting projects. People like this are the underworld and the gangsters. Mamakai must be related. After entering the house, Chu Zhao and Suner didn't think anything of it. After changing their shoe covers at the door, they walked in. Only Subai and Gu Fan stayed at the entrance of the entrance. Gu Fan looked at Subai, you feel it too? Subai nodded, very deep resentment. If there are a large number of police here at all times, and the uniforms carry the aura of a state agency, there is nothing to worry about these grievances, but this is impossible. After the investigation is completed, this place will naturally be regarded as a murder scene. Closed, even if the case is settled in the future, it is estimated that no rich people will actually buy and live here, and these grievances will likely disappear. The haunted house just appeared. Gu Fan looked around and said calmly while putting on his shoe covers, however, at least for now, the housing prices in this community will definitely be greatly affected by this. If it is haunted again in the future, then this place will devalue even more. Since when have you been worried about this kind of thing? Your family also has investments here, Subai asked. I'm not like you, who can come back after losing a lot of money. Gu Fan and Subai walked into the living room together. Here, the body had not been processed and tidied up under Chu Zhao's instructions, and it was still in the same condition as when it was first discovered. Even though the heating was turned off, the smell of corpses was already permeating the room. Suner stood aside. She wasn't very interested in this situation, but she was an audience after all, and she had seen more disgusting and horrifying scenes, so she wasn't too repulsed by it. The hostess and the 3 children were all stabbed to death on the dining table with knives and forks. The host had the flesh on his back dug out and held in place with knives and forks. Does he look like an angel? Chu Zhao introduced. It's really that interesting. Gu Fan walked behind the male host's body and casually reached out and touched the body of the male host's back. There were actually many policemen around, but Chu Zhao didn't say anything. they wouldn't foolishly shout something like not to destroy the scene. Subai stood in front of the wall, looking at the bat painted on the wall, with a smile on his face. This painting is really ugly. Have you discovered anything, you two? Chu Zhao looked at Subai and then at Gu Fan. Gu Fan looked at the dried blood on his fingers, rubbed his fingers, and said slowly, he was killed by someone, and there is no trace of energy left. This case should be your police work. No, Subai pointed at the wall and said, it's not that simple. Oh, what do you have in mind? Gu Fan walked up to Subai with interest and asked. I can't talk about it. It's just that someone has been away from the country for too long, so he is not very clear about some things in the country. Suner and Chu Zhao frowned slightly. Obviously, they heard another meaning of Subai, that is, Gu Fan may not be an audience in the Eastern Circle, so the story world he experienced should also be biased towards Western culture to a certain extent. Just as Eastern audiences rarely enter story worlds with the theme of vampires and werewolves in ancient castles, there are also story worlds with zombies and Taoist priests as the background in Western circles. Gu Fan smiled slightly but didn't refute anything. Seeing Gu Fan being so indifferent, Subai became more suspicious. This guy had come back sooner rather than later, but he came back at this time. What was his purpose? Are you really just coming back to see friends? However, let's deal with the matters at hand first. Although Subai has not gone to work in his detective agency for several months, in the final analysis, this is still the industry he planned to work in before, and assisting the police in solving cases is, even though there was a bonus, Subai was too embarrassed to keep using Fatty's money. Although money is rarely a problem for listeners, and being rich and powerful makes them so flamboyant that no listener dares to do it, but being small and wealthy is not difficult for them. Even the radio will acquiesce, and the listeners cannot be allowed to do so. A person who narrowly escaped death in the story world and returned to the real world is still begging for food, right? The dining table is relatively long, and people can sit on both sides, and one person can sit on the front and back ends. Generally speaking, one end is for the head of the household, and the other end should be for distinguished guests. Now, the owner of the house is sitting at that end, and the pieces of meat on his back have been torn open and stood up to form a pair of meat wings. The position opposite the owner, where the guests are sitting, is empty. Subai looked at the empty space, and then asked Chu Zhao, were there no tableware placed here before? No, Chu Zhao answered firmly. Subai nodded. Then, let's go look in the kitchen cupboard and see if there is a relatively clean pair of dishes and chopsticks. You mean, the murderer was treated like a distinguished guest and was entertained and sat here? Chu Zhao immediately turned around and said to the policeman beside him, did you hear that? Go check the kitchen again. Yes. The two policemen immediately went to the kitchen. After a while, one of them came back and reported, Bureau Chu, there is indeed a pair of tableware with obvious signs of being cleaned. It is much cleaner than other tableware around, but it has been cleaned so much it's very clean, no fingerprints remain, and no valuable DNA samples can be extracted. Oh, you did it very carefully. Subai smiled slightly and sat down at the guest's seat. Tell them to move away. Subai waved his hand, and Chu Zhao certainly knew what it meant. He turned around and said to his men, everyone, leave this house immediately, now, immediately. This is an order. All the police officers in the room obediently backed out. The prestige is pretty good, Subai joked. It's okay, Chu Zhao responded. The seat where Subai was sitting was that of the guest. He now pointed at the male host Jingqiaovu, who was made into a human angel opposite him. The image of the angel, as well as the playful and ugly vampire image on the wall, are obviously images from common myths and legends in the West. The murderer left these two works just to show his ridicule. In addition, there is a family at the dinner table. You can clearly see that on the edge of the dinner table in front of them, there are clear marks made by fingernails. The body has not yet been sent to the forensic doctor for in-depth examination, which will be done later. If you do it, the forensic report should show that there are sawdust and table paint residues between the nails. Chu Zhao reached out and picked up the hand of one of the deceased people and looked at it. That's true. Does this prove that the 5 deceased people were fixed to their seats and unable to move, but there were no traces of binding on the bodies or chairs? It's normal to have traces of not being tied up. Suner, please stand over. Hearing this, Suner approached the table. Immediately afterwards, Subai, who was sitting on the chair, began to shrive up quickly, and a faint green light appeared in his eyes. Immediately, the evil aura of the zombies along with the murderous intent were all concentrated on Chu Zhao and Suner. The two people immediately stood there as if they were possessed by a demonic disease. Their bodies began to tremble slightly, but they could not move at all. The evil spirit of zombies enters the body, suppressing the blood and soul of living people at the same time. Because the strength gap between Chu Zhao and Suner was too big compared to Subai's, unless they used their own enhancements and magical weapons, it would be really difficult for them to move in the face of Subai's terrifying zombie aura. A few moments. Subai returned to his original state. Suner was a little better, just panting a little, and Chu Zhao was already sweating profusely, because Suner believed that Subai would not hurt him, so he was more relaxed, while Chu Zhao was deliberately trying to withstand Subai's zombie aura, so the pressure he endured was naturally greater. It's a zombie, but that zombie just kills people and doesn't suck blood, Subai said. Forensic doctors can generally infer the time of death through the corpse's ultrasonic reaction, fundus changes, bladder urine, corpse phenomena, and food residues in the stomach, because due to the zombie's evil spirit entering the body, the time determined by the corpse's supernatural reaction will definitely deviate greatly from the death time speculated by several other aspects. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 480. So, are they wild or radio-raised zombies? Chu Zhao asked. Subai glanced at Chu Zhao and said, "Kid, please think through your mind when speaking." Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment, and then he seemed to understand what he meant by his words, as if he was saying that Subai was raised by a broadcaster. "Sorry, my fault." Gu Fan watched the scene from the side and shook his head helplessly. Obviously, the relationship between Chu Zhao and Subai had reached the point where they could not be integrated. Although they would not fight each other to death when they met, it was clear that Subai was not willing to continue. There was even the slightest chance that Chu Zhao could become his friend again, and he deliberately created a path to separate the relationship between the two people. In fact, his return this time should have been an opportunity. Gu Fan knew this. Taking advantage of his return, the 4 of them reunited, and then everyone had a meal together to reminisce about the past. The previous festivals and conflicts were also it can be cancelled with one stroke, and now all 4 people have become listeners. In the past, a murder club was established in the real world, but now it is not impossible to form an advance and retreat alliance in the audience circle. However, it is a pity that Subai seems to have no desire to have any contact with the past at all. This has been clearly shown from his attitude towards Suner and Chu Zhao. Then, is that zombie an audience? Chu Zhao asked again. Nonsense. Subai stretched out his hand and patted the shoulder of the hostess's body at the dinner table. Are there zombies in the real world that kill people without even taking a bite of their blood? He is obviously worried. Where something? Concerned about the punishment of broadcasting, Chu Zhao thought it was ridiculous. Since he was concerned about broadcasting, why did he kill people randomly? Master, he is in the real estate business, right? Are your hands clean? Subai stood up and asked while arranging his clothes. You don't need to do any research to know this. A few years ago, when real estate was just starting to become popular, didn't tragedies such as forced demolitions and even burials occur frequently? That is to say, in recent years, as the country has paid more attention to it, it has begun to converge. Chu Zhao replied. Road. That's understandable. Maybe the male master deserves it. There is a zombie-enhanced audience doing justice to God. Subai smiled and took out a cigarette from his pocket, not minding that this was a murder scene. Light the cigarette on your own. Even if Jinkuavyu deserves it, how could that man kill Jinkuavyu's wife and children together? Suner asked incomprehensibly, how could he do this? Yes, how could he do this? Even if the person he wants to kill deserves it, why should his wife and his 3 children, all under 10 years old, be killed? Subai was quite indifferent to this. When he was sitting in that position and releasing his zombie aura just now, he was actually imitating the murderer invisibly. Why was there the punishment of association in ancient times? If one person breaks the law, the whole family or even the whole clan will be punished together. Subai blew out a smoke ring and shook the ashes. Regardless of Chu Zhao's speechless expression as he looked at the ashes on the ground, Subai continued. Jinkuavyu may have done a lot of unscrupulous things when he made his fortune. In fact, any place where he made his fortune in recent years is rarely said to be absolutely clean. I haven't done any investigation, so I don't know, but assuming that Jinkuavyu, if he has done something harmful, he will make money, so his wife can buy brand name clothes and gold and silver jewelry. She can do beauty treatments and play cards without going to work. His children can go to aristocratic schools and enjoy better education. Depending on the environment and living conditions, you can use more expensive drugs with lower side effects when you are sick. Yes, Jinkuavyu did the unjust thing by himself, but the bloody money he earned was also enjoyed by his family. Since he has enjoyed such benefits, he must bear what kind of responsibilities, right? What? A case a few years ago occurred in Pangjia, a village in the east of Lingshan Town, Quyang County, Hebei Province. 7 members of a villager named Pang were killed and the family was exterminated. Then the vicious beast walked onto the road and took the initiative after killing the people. He crashed under a truck and committed suicide. The reason was that the owner of the family surnamed Pang owed the murderer 100,000 yuan and refused to pay it back. However, Pang bought his son a house, a car, and a big wedding. As a result, the murderer couldn't bear it anymore and finally, perished together. Killing is wrong. To say the least, there is a wrongdoer and a debtor. If you want to kill, you should kill the one who doesn't pay back the money. But the murderer killed the whole family. Because the murderer felt that it was because of borrowing his own money that the family was living so well and that person could buy a car for his son and hold a wedding. Moreover, in fact, his family members must all know that the head of the family named Pang owed him a debt. Although it was someone else's money, he didn't persuade him to pay it back or still enjoy the benefits of the money knowingly. From an emotional level, the murderer is still understood and sympathized by many people. Well, this case should be being hyped by major media now, because it's the end of the year and it's time for private debts to be repaid, and people are happy to see this kind of news. Gu Fan reached out and touched his chin. Subai, your thoughts and ideas make me really surprised. Is this what a highly educated person should say? You actually support the implication. Subai shrugged, it doesn't matter what my personal thoughts are. I just simulated the murderer's thoughts. In fact, in terms of cause and effect, the broadcast actually means the same, isn't it? In fact, there was one sentence that Subai didn't say. If Chu Zhao became the audience because he saved Chu Zhao in that incident, then what about Suner? Suner was followed by you and Gu Fan in London, so why did she become an audience member? When he heard Subai say the word cause and effect, Gu Fan's eyes suddenly narrowed and he was a little surprised and said, you actually came into contact with these 2 words. It really surprises me. The speed of your growth and your progress makes me feel a little scared. Subai was not modest, he just poked Gu Fan's chest lightly with his finger. If you count it in terms of time, you entered the broadcast almost a year before me. Well, you are indeed very slow. You are a year ahead of me, and you are still a senior listener. Moreover, even if you hide yourself, you cannot hide the aura of a senior listener so realistically. Advanced listeners are better at hiding their aura. Subai knows this, but Subai knows even more that when advanced listeners hide their aura, they either have the feeling of becoming ordinary people or the feeling of advanced listeners. They don't have that ability. Simulate the aura of strength of a senior listener and then deceive another senior listener. This point has been fully recognized by Subai from Jizhen. At the same time, Subai has come into contact with a lot of high-level listeners, and they are all like this. Therefore, this also proves that Gufan is definitely not a high-level audience. Audience. You are very good, but that doesn't mean I'm bad. Gufan looked very helpless. Anyway, I feel that my improvement speed is not bad at least. Let's see who you compare with. Subai threw the cigarette butt into the vase in the living room. Compared with those cannon fodder, you will definitely be outstanding. Subai stretched out his hand and gently dusted off the dust on Gufan's shoulders. Okay, Chu Zhao, I won't help you catch zombies. You can learn from the Hong Kong police in Hong Kong movies and form a ghost hunting team for fun. Turning around, Subai was planning to leave. Then how do I close the case? Chu Zhao was dumbfounded. Case closed. Subai stopped, turned around, and pointed at Gufan. It's not actually an unjust case if he is arrested. When the zombie killed someone in the living room, he should have been sitting there. Location to eat. There was a look of surprise on Chu Zhao's face, and even Suner was shocked. How come this twist and turn finally involved Gufan again? Gufan, is that you? Chu Zhao looked at Gufan. Last time, because Subai was involved in a woman's murder case, Chu Zhao didn't know whether it was intentional or unintentional. In short, he wanted to take Subai back to the police station for investigation. But Subai didn't care about him at all, and that was just Subai's involvement. If Gufan was really a ferocious beast, then Chu Zhao felt depressed. He knew that if Gufan was the murderer, there was nothing he could do. Me? What does it have to do with me? Didn't you say it was done by zombies? I am not an enhanced zombie. Gufan pointed at himself and smiled. Okay, Subai nodded. Actually, I'm not sure, but according to Murphy's Law, things will naturally develop toward the worst expected outcome. Subai came back, stood by the dining table, and pointed to the chair he had just sat on. When I just sat down, I noticed that the two sides of the backrest of the chair were obviously sunken. I also touched it with my hands. The dented part is obviously very clean, and even has a faint fragrant smell. No, it is a sacred smell. Most of the food on the dinner table has spoiled, but the food near the end where the guests are sitting deteriorates significantly slower, and can even continue to be eaten. As soon as Subai said these words, he immediately took out the Hellfire shotgun and pointed it at Gufan. Subai! Subai, don't be impulsive! Chu Zhao and Suner immediately shouted nervously. However, Subai still pulled the trigger. Boom! The barrage of Hellfire shotguns rushed towards Gufan. Gufan crossed his hands, and a pair of white wings appeared behind him, and then covered himself, blocking Subai's shot. Subai opened his palms and took back the Hellfire shotgun. Then he looked at Gufan seriously. If I hadn't just met a birdman a while ago, I really wouldn't have thought of that. Gufan, you and Jinkuavua must have known each other for a long time, so now that you are back, you may have communicated with them, and they held a family banquet to treat you as a distinguished guest. Gufan retracted his wings and said expressionlessly, I didn't kill them. I know you didn't kill them. Subai directly chose to believe it, but that zombie appeared when you were eating, and he was right in front of you, Gufan, and killed everyone you. Gufan knew, even a family that could still be considered friends in the real world was killed. Subai turned sideways and pointed at Jinkuavua, whose back flesh was uncovered. When zombies kill people, you should still be sitting in your seat, watching your friend's family members die in front of you one by one. Your friend, after being killed by the other party, made a pair of flesh wings. I don't believe that the zombie was to mock the police who later discovered the murder scene. In fact, he was mocking you who was still sitting in this position motionless. And you, apart from releasing your wings because you couldn't restrain your inner anger at first, you did nothing. After the murderer killed someone and left, you still had the thought to wash away the dishes and chopsticks you used. Gu Fan's face gradually began to turn livid. It was obvious that he was suppressing his anger, because Subai's words were exposing his scars and tearing his cowardice and unbearableness into the sunlight. Why did you enter the story world a year earlier than me, but you are still on the same level as me? Subai stuck out his tongue, licked his lips, then walked to Gu Fan, looked at his face, and said seriously. Because. Coward. It is impossible to become a strong person. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 481. There are some things that Subai doesn't know, but that doesn't mean that Subai can't guess something. Subai is not sure whether Gu Fan's feelings for Suner are true or false, but he thinks there should be some, but Gu Fan's feelings for Suner are not sure. Fan's application to work at a medical research institute in London because of Suner now seems to be obviously open to question. In fact, Gu Fan had been studying in Europe before. It was only during the time when the murder club was established that Gu Fan returned to China to take up a job due to pressure and wishes from his family. If you think about it, Gu Fan should have heard about it while abroad. The horror broadcast has become a listener, and looking at the pair of angel wings he showed before, it can be basically concluded that Gu Fan belongs to the audience of the Western Circle. Subai didn't know how radio differentiated listeners in Eastern and Western circles. Is it based on region or race? The black audience was an audience in the Eastern Circle, and Gu Fan, as a second-generation Chinese official, became a Western audience. In other words, it is not accurate to judge whether the distinction is based on blood or place of birth. Maybe, it is more differentiated based on cultural identity. When Subai's generation was still young, with the advancement of China's reform and opening up and the beginning of the budding and popularization stage of the Internet era, the government of the Republic, which had just decided to abandon its previous self-isolation and want to embrace the world, was faced with Western culture. It seemed very inexperienced when the ideological trend invaded, and almost actively lost the cultural regional sector to the West. Almost 10 years ago, in Reader's Digest, the most popular publication, the most popular articles were actually articles like "The Moon is Rounder in Foreign Countries," "A Chinese Old Lady Saved Enough Money Before She Died and Finally Bought a House," or "The Foreign Old Lady Who Lived in the House for Half Her Life and Paid Off the Loan Before She Died." Such Western chicken soup has almost invaded the generations born in the 1980s and the generation born in the 1990s. The self-system and cultural identity are highly denied and doubted, and instead willingly embrace Western universal values. In recent years, with the thorough popularization of the Internet, the deepening of world exchanges, and the opening of people's wisdom, this trend of thought has finally been curbed. The subprime mortgage crisis in the United States, human rights wars, racial discrimination, and other issues have been exposed to the Chinese people. Only then did most Chinese people realize that there is essentially no difference between the elder brother and the second brother at home and abroad, and to a certain extent, domestic ones actually have more advantages. During that period, Suner was a child of the Red family of the Republic and had been determined to enter politics since he was a child, so he was very determined in his thinking. Chu Zhao, on the other hand, was fighting against his father's domestic violence and power every day. With other things on his mind, Subai had already begun to take over some businesses in the consortium, so he was more mature. Gu Fan seemed to be the deepest in this trend of thinking. Not only did he study abroad, but he almost stayed in working abroad. He dislikes his family background and identity at home, and is eager to rely on his own abilities to go to the West to realize his values and ideals. Subai was even guessing that after he beat up the Birdman last time, the Birdman had spread information about him to the audience in the Western Circle. Only then did Gufan notice him, and Gufan suddenly discovered, one of the 3 silly buns that he used to play a childish game of killing, actually became an audience, and his strength made him feel a little shocked. In addition, after the meeting, Gufan deliberately promoted the atmosphere of reminiscing about the past of the 4, and also inspired Chu Zhao to contact Suner. All the circumstances showed that he was trying to build relationships and that he was trying to restore the old days of the Killing Club. An intimate relationship. Be a little more narcissistic, guess a little more deeply. Subai could even think that Gufan was deliberately building a relationship with him and building a communication link between the 2 groups of forces in the Eastern and Western circles where he existed. It's like the relationship between Count Chair and the old lamas in the West. The 2 parties conduct sales and transactions and help each other to a certain extent. After all, Subai is enhanced by the blood race. This enhanced sense of identity undoubtedly makes Western audiences feel closer, making them instinctively feel that although Subai is Chinese, since he has chosen the blood race enhancement, it is obvious that he is more familiar with Western culture. It's fascinating, and although Subai behaves relatively withdrawn and is too lazy to socialize, the monk, Gyatso and Fatty gathered around him are already a force that cannot be underestimated. It's impossible for a coward to become a strong person. This sentence is not that Subai is deliberately mocking his so-called childhood friend, but rather that he is rejecting the invitation of the force he represents. You know, Subai doesn't even bother to make friends with the domestic audience circle, and naturally he has no the willingness to make friends with Western circles and then play a role like a leading party. Moreover, Subai's thoughts are very simple and pure. Listeners, just think about how to be strong and think about how to survive. To think about things like social interaction, relationships, organizations, etc. is a childish behavior that ignores the important and the inferior. After saying this, which was almost a slap in the face, Subai turned around and finally walked out of the house where the murder was committed. When he returned to his car, Subai took out a bottle of mineral water from the car drawer and took 2 sips. To be honest, he doesn't care what Chu Zhao thinks of him, nor does he care what Gufan thinks of him. The only way to protect Suner is to stay away from her. When he gave Chu Zhao and Suner magical weapons, in fact, it is a very dangerous behavior, which may really kill them, because whatever you give them, the broadcast will add difficulty to them in the next story world. However, Suner should be almost in her second story world. Subai thought in his heart that according to the preview of the painting, Suner would die in the second story world. Fortunately, the broadcast was currently off the air. Subai decided to ask Suner to chat alone after a while. In short, do your best to obey fate. Go and sweep the grave. A smile appeared on Subai's lips. He remembered what the ghost of his senior sister had told him. A group of new neighbors suddenly appeared, confused but full of resentment. What kind of resentful soul can be confused but full of resentment? It was obvious that someone had suppressed them, allowing them to endure pain even after they died and turned into ghosts, but did not give them the chance to become evil ghosts. This kind of punishment is really comparable to going to the underworld after death to get fried in oil. Subai held the cart with his right hand and spread out his left hand. A ball of evil energy condensed from the palm of his hand. The evil energy of the zombies has an innate restraint effect on ghosts. It can produce such an effect. Those Taoist priests put stickers on the foreheads of zombies. Talismans are actually a means of controlling evil with evil, causing the evil spirit in the zombie's body to be disordered and thereby suppressing the zombie's ferocious spirituality, or ferocious instinct. It's really interesting, Subai murmured to himself. Yes, compared to Gufan who suddenly came back with a special purpose, Subai found the zombie-enhanced listener more interesting. He killed the whole family and implicated the whole family, giving the listeners the power of broadcasting to the greatest extent. To the maximum extent, in the Magic City, Such a person who looks like a messenger of justice appears, although his methods are extreme, cruel, and even inhumane. The car drove into the cemetery. It was quite quiet and quiet. Subai originally chose this place for his senior sister to be her family. At least it was enough. You must know that the house prices of the ghost house are also rising step by step. People want to buy it while they are still alive. I can't afford a decent house, and now I can't even afford to die. Because the Chinese New Year was about to come, there were many people coming to visit the tombs and pay homage. When Subai got off the car and walked up the path, he saw many people sweeping the tombs around him. The cemetery has a special management organization, and there are offices here, which are somewhat similar to the properties in the community, except that the properties here are responsible for the dead. Cleaning up weeds and maintaining the cemetery environment is the top priority. Some monks will be invited every now and then. The Taoist priest came over to chant sutras and enjoy salvation. In short, he wanted to maximize the added value of the yin house. Otherwise, how could he afford the housing prices? Subai walked into the office first. The office was very large, with more than a dozen dedicated staff, and these were just clerks. Everyone else was doing what they were reading, or receiving family members or sorting out documents. A little boy was sitting in the corner of the office, with a bag of snacks and coke next to him, and a comic book in his hand, which he was reading with gusto. Yes, he should be the child of the staff here. The child is on winter vacation, so he keeps it at his workplace for easy supervision. Subai did not go to other staff, but walked directly to the little boy with a smile on his face. The little boy was probably only 7 or 8 years old. He was eating snacks and reading a comic book. He looked quite cute with a tiger-like head and a neat little crew cut. Subai knelt down in front of the little boy. "What comics are you reading? Can you show me to my brother?" The little boy smiled innocently and pointed the comic book at Subai. Subai saw that there were very detailed photos inside. They were not cartoons, but corpses. These corpses were arranged in various shapes, some were mating on the bed, and some had their heads sewn backwards. On the neck, there are limbs that are messed up, which is really shocking, exuding a black and bloody mockery that is so rich that it is suffocating. "How is it? Does it look good?" the little boy asked honestly, just like a child showing off his treasure to an adult. Subai shook his head. "No, it's a pity." The little boy was anxious. "What's wrong?" "Such a good background, such a good corpse, the deliberate feeling after you put it up is too obvious, just like today's photography artists have long stopped relying on exciting and exaggerated picture effects to become famous. Now they have to pay attention to there is something called depth, but the way you pose for the photo is too contrived, and it actually puts you at a disadvantage." As if he were a teacher, Subai knelt down, took the booklet from the little boy's hand, and opened a page. On that page was a photo of Jinkuavyu's family who died tragically at the dinner table. The protagonist was Jinkuavyu. The flesh on Jinkuavyu's back was peeled off and fixed with a knife and fork to make a pair of meat wings. "What mistake did this man make?" Subai asked. "Forced demolition, 3 people were buried alive, 2 were killed in revenge, and more than a dozen were maimed." The little boy thought seriously and replied, "One of the children who was buried alive was about the same age as me. He often float over and play with me, he was buried alive with his grandparents." Subai nodded. "Look, with these fleshy wings, it is obvious that everyone can understand what you mean, and can also see that you are mocking an angel who represents holiness and justice, but it is only that's all. In the corner of this photo, that is, on the other side of the dining table, there is a person sitting. He is watching you making your art, but he doesn't dare to do anything to you, and he dares to get angry but dare not speak. In fact, you should wait until his 2 pairs of white wings are spread out when he is angry before taking a picture. The fleshy wings of a dead man plus the real angel spreading his white wings across the dining table. This irony, this background, This depth, this contrast, it's all there. Only in this way can it be called a work of art, comparable to The Last Supper. Or, if you want to further enhance the satirical effect, you can bring a feather duster and pluck the chicken feathers from the duster and insert them into the meat wings. That picture was breathtakingly beautiful. Sudbai said with an intoxicated look. The little boy looked at Sudbai blankly, his mouth slightly opened, his eyes full of surprise. Sudbai's narration seemed to open the door to a deeper art palace for him. Yes, it's so beautiful. The little boy admired while imagining it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 482. The little boy just looked at Sudbai for about 3 minutes, and Sudbai looked at him. Gradually, the other expressions on the little boy's face began to fade away, and the pair of black eyes became it was much deeper, and even in its depths, Sudbai seemed to have discovered a touch of teasing. This kid actually started taunting me. You should know where this place is. The little boy slowly closed his book. At this time, he lost the innocence of a child before, and a serious atmosphere suddenly appeared. Sudbai was thinking about a question after seeing this little boy. Is this guy a dwarf, or a child prodigy who is naturally smart or even too smart? Cemetery office, Sudbai pulled a chair next to him and sat on it. To outsiders, it seems like two uncles and nephews who know each other are chatting harmoniously. However, no one can know what a terrifying whirlpool is hidden between the two people. Moreover, these two people, both in terms of their own existence and inner performance, are out-and-out representatives of the dark system. They have their own obsession with blood, death, and killing, and have even evolved their own art. The little boy waved his hand, and everything around him was shrouded in a layer of black and white. However, the staff here were still doing what they were supposed to do, and they didn't seem to be affected at all. This is a barrier, similar to a zombie's ghost wall, so that living people nearby cannot discover what is happening inside. A smile appeared at the corner of Sudbai's mouth. The little thing seemed to have something to show him. The photo in the album should be his proud work, but under Sudbai's comments among them, he has definitely fallen into the inferior category. For a child, this is a very unconvincing thing, so he will definitely follow his own temperament and take out one of his treasures to regain the place. The average audience is very cautious about their magic weapons and secrets, and would not easily reveal them to others unless it is a life or death situation. However, this kid's brain circuit is obviously different from that of ordinary listeners, and he is much more willful and childlike. To a certain extent, in fact, his behavior is a bit similar to Sudbai's. I only do what I like to do, and I don't know how to use it. No, I don't bother to use adults' stupid and disgusting way of thinking to decide my life and my life. Choose. Perhaps, Gufan, who was sitting on the other side of the dinner table, was also aware of this. He knew that if the zombie-enhanced boy listener opposite him dared to stop him, he would really dare to fight against him regardless of the rules and punishments of the broadcast. He would win. The negative result, the result of life and death, must have been announced before the punishment of the broadcast came, so Gufan gave up decisively at that time and watched the Jinkuabua family who had friendship with him die tragically in front of him, and even the other party's treatment of him, the humiliation was all endured. At this moment, pieces of Black Qing dynasty official uniforms floated down from above, like ghosts, bringing an eerie sense of déjà vu. The surrounding temperature also seemed to drop in an instant, which also affected those who were watching. The cemetery staff at work thought the heating system in the office was malfunctioning. Zombies wearing official Qing dynasty uniforms are a standard costume for zombies after the Hong Kong zombie-themed series became popular. The official explanation is that wearing Qing dynasty official uniforms on zombies in zombie Hong Kong movies is a form of contempt and ridicule for the decadent Qing court. But the official statement is an official statement after all, just like the public servants of the people serve the people. In fact, the real reason is that Hong Kong is another circle of Chinese close to the mainland, mostly overseas Chinese, and the Qing government sold off officials and titles after the mid to late period. It has almost become a trend, and there are many wealthy Chinese living overseas. Otherwise, Mr. Sun would not have been raising donations among overseas Chinese in Nanyang. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, the Central Dynasty had always maintained a hateful attitude toward overseas Chinese. Those Chinese who left their homeland to develop a survival base in Nanyang were basically regarded as rebels who had forgotten their origins, although they lived a very prosperous life in Nanyang. But they have no political status in the motherland and are even considered sinners in exile. However, they are far less popular than Taiwanese businessmen when the republic first reformed and opened up. Therefore, these wealthy Chinese in Nanyang will basically buy themselves an official status from China through legal channels. In the later stages of the Qing government, all moral integrity was lost. Officials and titles were clearly priced according to their grades. If they were innocent and paid enough money, a set of official uniforms plus discs, etc. are all given to you. Therefore, almost all the overseas Chinese at that time, who were from decent families, were officials of the imperial court. After death, they naturally had to be buried in their own official uniforms to show off to their ancestral families. Therefore, in Hong Kong and coastal areas, if there are Zongzi zombies, they will most likely appear wearing Qing dynasty official uniforms. And because areas along the southern coast were developed relatively late, there are not as many ancient tombs as there are in Henan and Shaanxi. Here, the 4 Qing dynasty official uniforms that Subai saw were oversized, and each one was brilliant. Each of these 4 pieces of clothing was actually a magical weapon. And it is a magic weapon suitable for zombie enhancers. In the middle, there is a small size, which should be worn by the little boy himself. A string of bright datong beads exudes a pale white light. There are many mysteries hidden in the dark-colored clothes. It's not a prop costume used for filming ghost movies, but a shirt specially tailored for a little boy. Wearing it, the little boy's strength can increase by several %. The little boy stood up, and the dress naturally fell on him. At the same time, his eye sockets began to sunk, and his body began to shrivel up. His whole body and the dress fit together perfectly, with 2 protruding lips exposed at the corners of his mouth. He raised his fangs, lowered his head, and let out a low roar. His aura suddenly increased. Whether it was a feeling or a pure appearance, it was considered top-notch. Licking his lips, the little boy seemed to be very interested in Subai's flesh and blood. He stretched out his fingers and made a hooking motion towards Subai, with a hint of provocation and at the same time, a childish air. "It's so ugly." Subai shook his head. "It seems that someone's level of appreciation and taste is really just like that. After watching too many Hong Kong movies, everything must be according to the Hong Kong movies. Limitations and stereotypes. Contempt, for the mediocre, is used to obey, but for the wise, it is used to break." The little boy curled his lips in disdain and said, "I don't think a vampire is qualified to comment on the taste of these clothes." Perhaps because he has turned into a zombie, the sound does not come from his throat, but echoes around, and seems to be directed at your heart. Ordinary people may subconsciously tremble when faced with this sentence. Then he was terrified. It can also be seen that this little boy has truly integrated the zombie bloodline into his own character and imprinted it on the depths of his soul. For him, the zombie bloodline is more than just him in the story world. The guarantee and tool for survival are his life. Otherwise, it is absolutely impossible to interpret a zombie so vividly. Only then did Subai realize that it seemed that the little boy had not seen his hidden bloodline, and did not know that he was actually one of his kind. This is a normal thing. Sudbai's bloodline has been strengthened many times and has also absorbed ancestors' blood essence. Therefore, when others feel Sudbai's aura, what they can feel is the most. There are obviously vampires. As for the audience with dual bloodlines, it is not impossible, but they are definitely rare, and they often cannot grow up, so they are basically not considered. Just imagine, if Sudbai hadn't had enough opportunities and had sacrificed his life to get more things, otherwise, he might really have been stuck in the hurdle where his mutant bloodline couldn't be strengthened through Wadian. The body shriveled up at this moment, Sudbai's eyes released a green light, and the whole person was shrouded in a layer of black mist. At this moment, he really looked like he had just emerged from the 1,000-year-old tomb. The zombies coming out of it bring ominousness and disaster. Is this okay? Double bloodline, the little boy looked in disbelief. Double bloodlines caused conflicts and mutations, and they were able to join the ranks of seniors. Cool. However, the little boy still shook his head and said seriously, but this time, you are not as artistic as me. If there was an audience here at this moment, witnessing all this and hearing what these two people were talking about, they would be so speechless that they would vomit out several liters of blood on purpose. Damn it! Please, one of you is a lunatic who nearly led 8,000 dead souls into downtown Shanghai not long ago, and the other is a pervert who uses the so-called punishing evil as a pretext but actually likes to pose for artistic photos of the dead. You are both in the upper reaches of the senior and powerful characters, but the so-called art competition of my style, my show started here. Are you mentally retarded? Looking at the serious look of the little boy, Sudbai also nodded seriously. However, this did not mean that Sudbai admitted that he had lost. In fact, as for which feeling and style best suited the artistic atmosphere of zombies, Sudbai actually he already had the answer, and this answer was obtained by cheating. In the story world, his clone had actually told Sudbai what he would look like a year from now. The zombie's body began to become slightly rounder than before, and the wounds all over the body were stained with a layer of red yin hong. The lines of the whole person became much softer at this time, but it highlighted a kind of elegance. Temperament. The ruthlessness, filthiness, and evil of the zombies are paired with the nobility, elegance, and evil charm of the vampires at this time, and they exist harmoniously together. At the same time, the light blue evil spirit of the zombies and the bloody red blood of the vampires converge to form a purple color. Sudbai's hair turned into flowing purple hair at this time. At this moment, Sudbai realized the origin of the purple hair of his clone. The other person stood in front of him and said, "This hairstyle is too ugly." Sudbai dyed his purple hair for a while after returning to the real world. Now he feels it's really silly. The clone was obviously reminding yourself at the time that after highly integrating the vampire bloodline and the zombie bloodline, you will get a brand new bloodline that is unique and your own. The wool of the windbreaker was slowly torn out, Sudbai's blood soaked into it, and the evil spirit was integrated into it, forming a strange reddish and blackish tone. However, when the windbreaker transformed into this color was worn on Sudbai at this time, but it's so appropriate, so relevant. When Sudbai revealed his pupils from the darkness of the windbreaker, the little boy pursed his lips, a little unwilling and helpless. In the end, it turned into a sigh. He nodded, obviously acknowledging that Sudbai also showed a kind of attitude even in the zombie shape. Above his aesthetic level. It's beautiful, the little boy sighed with emotion. To kill people in such a state is simply a supreme compliment to those who were killed. I really envy them. When Sudbai heard this, the corners of his mouth curved slightly, and he asked casually. Then, let me kill you once, okay? The little boy slowly closed his eyes. Good. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 483. Sudbai slowly stretched out his hand and placed it on the little boy's neck, his slender fingers gently stroked it, and his dark black nails lingered here for a while. The little boy closed his eyes slightly, and his facial expression began to tremble slightly. This trembling was not because of fear, worry, or hesitation. Rather, excited. Yes, being able to experience the feeling of being killed like this is indeed a very glorious thing in his opinion. He is even looking forward to the fact that after he is killed so elegantly, his photo will also be put in your favorite book. It will definitely be an art treasure. However, after a while, Sudbai's body began to return to its original shape, the nails disappeared, the skin began to regain its plumpness, the color of the hair also changed back to the usual black, and Sudbai's eyes also showed a hint of tiredness. The little boy opened his eyes with a look of disappointment. What, you won't kill me? I will be killed by you voluntarily, and you will not be punished by the broadcast. It's boring, Sudbai sighed. Being killed voluntarily does not have the fear and hysterical struggle before death. Even if the photos are taken, there is no aura and deep beauty. Photos like this, it is just superficial, like a meaningless moaning article stacked with gorgeous words. This kind of work has no sense of art at all and is just a garbage product. Sudbai looked into the little boy's eyes seriously. Are you willing to be a garbage product? The little boy shook his head, and with a wave of his hand, the clothes on his body disappeared, and the gray and white tones around him disappeared. It's boring, it's really boring. The little boy looked very dissatisfied, but he was helpless because he couldn't deny that Sudbai was right. Even if it is invisible, from the beginning to now, the little boy knows in his heart that all of this is dominated by Sudbai. It belongs to Sudbai's aesthetics, Sudbai's perception, and Sudbai's taste. Suddenly, he was being dragged away by Sudbai, but the little boy didn't think there was anything wrong with this. Although it is difficult for the world to recognize it, the little boy has a heart to become an artist. In the pursuit of art, he really cannot care about anything, even his own life. It is really incredible that such a person and such an audience can reach today step by step. But with Sudbai, an even more incredible guy, in front of him, it seems that everything is not so difficult to understand. My dad is going to get off work soon. My mom has cooked a meal at home. Do you want to come and eat together? My mom cooks good Sichuan food. The little boy returned to his previous state at this time, as if he really just an ordinary kid next door. At this time, a man wearing work clothes and holding a pair of scissors came over. He should be the gardener in the cemetery and the father of the little boy in front of him. No, Sudbai took out a cigarette and handed one to the gardener. Your son is very smart and cute. Haha, thank you, I hope I didn't cause any trouble to you. The gardener smiled and held the little boy's hand and went home together after get off work. Sudbai lit a cigarette for himself, took a puff, and blew out a smoke ring. No matter how you looked at it, the father didn't seem to have any tendency to domestic violence. He was an ordinary and kind father. So this guy, are the unique aesthetics and stubborn pursuit of people really innate? Oh, yes, I have fallen into the trap. Sudbai laughed at himself as he walked out of the office. In recent years, the media's reports on murderers, rapes, and criminals have often gone down the wrong path and tried their best to dig out. There are tragic stories behind criminals, but there are many people suffering in this world. Did they all commit crimes? Sudbai suddenly remembered that he didn't seem to want the other person's WeChat account. For some reason, this little boy gave Sudbai a strange sense of intimacy, as if he was looking into a mirror, and seeing him was like seeing himself. Those special ghosts in the cemetery should be toys raised by little boys here. They are evildoers who are being tortured. He is like a judge or an executive, exercising the justice he has within the limits of the broadcasting rules. There is no right or wrong, and it is difficult to sort out what is right and wrong. The little boy followed his father home, and Sudbai was about to leave here. In fact, he didn't come here with any purpose or intention, he just came out of curiosity. When two people meet, discuss, and finally separate, onlookers may see it in confusion, but the two parties involved find it very good and enjoyable because they are alone. When Sudbai returned to his car, he saw a picture album falling on his car window. It belonged to the little boy. There was a string of WeChat ads on the first page of the picture album. With a smile on his face, Subai took out his mobile phone, added the WeChat ID, then started the car and prepared to leave. Shanghai has a new traffic regulation, which is similar to the rapid bus. One line of the road is completely given over to the rapid bus, and other private vehicles are not allowed to use it. However, this kind of stupid regulation has caused the new year even now, when there are not many private cars on the road. There was also a traffic jam. This feeling is like a leader who feels that he has no political achievements and no sense of existence without much effort. As soon as he thinks about it, many local governments promote green travel, reduce the use of private cars, promote public transportation and other measures to alleviate the urban problems. Traffic pressure, but they did not close 4 stores, and continued to collect taxes on private cars in a playful way. Then they blamed all the problems of urban traffic pressure on private cars. But in the final analysis, it is still because of urban construction. The planners' own short-sightedness and ignorance did not predict how the number of private cars in the city would explode in 10 years. In fact, the current traffic congestion in many cities in China also depends on this reason. As a last resort, Subai had no choice but to take a detour, preferring to drive a little longer than being stuck in traffic and playing turtle race. During this detour, Subai unexpectedly found that he had arrived in front of a familiar building. I have been to this building myself, because Ying Ying's office, no, it's a studio, is right here. Taking out his cell phone, Subai dialed Ying Ying's number. Subai still liked this straightforward woman who was not sloppy in her work or relationships. This may be a common problem for every man. For women, the best thing is that when you need it, whether it is your body or your soul, they will immediately come to you and provide you with physical or mental services. Once you want to be quiet, those women had better go as far away as possible. Obviously, Subai is definitely not among the ranks of such scumbags. He has no interest in Ying Ying or between men and women, but accepted Ying Ying last time. After my son's sexual asphyxia was treated, I would still miss that feeling occasionally. As for matters related to men and women, Subai suddenly realized that he seemed to have been abstaining from sex for a long time, not only from when he became an audience to now, but also from before he became an audience. It seemed that he had not done that kind of thing for a long time. Something happened. It's not that Subai has become indifferent to that aspect, or that Subai has any mental or physical problems. As a young man, he must have tasted countless women of all kinds before, but later, Subai began to feel that sex without that kind of love and feeling was a bit like breeding animals, which was really meaningless. Therefore, for so long, I almost had that kind of spark with Sunar by chance, but in the end it didn't happen due to various reasons. And now the relationship between Subai and Sunar is becoming increasingly estranged. It is basically impossible to have a spiritual and physical sex. Even a fat man would occasionally go to a young lady to solve his needs, but Subai really didn't like this. A normal person, can suppress his normal physiological needs, which also illustrates Subai's tenacity. It took a while for the call to come through. Hello. Obviously, because Subai often changed his mobile phone and number, Ying Ying didn't know who was calling. Hey, it's me. It's you, what's wrong, do you miss me? I just happened to pass by the building where your studio is. Are you up there? Well, there's nothing I can do. I'm a woman who has to support my family on my own. It's New Year's Eve tomorrow, but I still have to be busy with work. Who are you robbing again? Subai asked. No, I took a long break after what happened last time, but I plan to resume my work after the Chinese New Year. I just bought a batch of new toys. Oh, by the way, there are also many sets. I designed the uniform myself and I'm trying it on. The Queen's uniform that Ying Ying wore last time appeared in Subai's mind, and he couldn't help shaking his fingers slightly and tapping the back of the phone. Since you're passing by here, don't follow Dao's example. Come and have a seat. I happen to have 2 pieces of clothing here. I'm not very good at putting them on myself. I need a helper, but my female assistant has gone back to her hometown to celebrate the new year. Dao was the one who controlled floods. How much water is there under you? Subai said. Young Master Su, with the relationship and fate between you and me, we can't talk about love at first sight or lasting love, but I think it's reasonable for us to have a one-night stand or a friendship or sex, right? Really? Okay, I'll make you a cocktail. You can park the car and get in. After hanging up the phone, Subai drove the car to the bottom of the building. You can park directly here. As soon as you got off the car, before you could lock the door, 2 salesmen wearing smooth costumes walked up to Subai. Sir, Durex is holding an event, new products, free trial. The girl in the costume put 2 cute little packages into Subai's hands and started to find the people below to continue distributing them. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 484. Going upstairs, Subai rang the doorbell in front of Ying Ying'er's office. Soon, the door was opened. However, to Subai's surprise, Ying Ying'er was wearing a slim-fitting down jacket. Black leggings were not the kind of outfit that Subai had imagined before that would make people's blood flow. Although they were beautiful and fashionable, they were definitely not Ying Ying'er style. Why, are you disappointed? Ying Ying'er smiled slightly, as if she had read Subai's mind. She walked to her desk, picked up a cocktail and handed it to Subai. If you really want to be with me, if there was some liquid exchange, you wouldn't come here specifically to find me, am I right? Subai took the cocktail and took a sip. It tasted good and quite unique. Hearing this, Subai smiled and said, I don't know, maybe, I really thought about it at that time. Are you sure? Ying Ying'er sat on the desk, her graceful buttocks protruding, and her 2 slender legs crossed together, exuding an aura of charm that is difficult to describe in words. This person specializes in people's hearts. A knowledgeable woman naturally knows how to show her most beautiful side. Even if she knows something about Subai, she has seen a different side of Subai from ordinary people. However, this kind of teasing, is what makes Subai so beautiful. It made her feel even more excited. It's a bit like scratching a lice on a lion's head. Well, what was he talking about before? Is Dao treating the water? The area between his legs seems to be really hot and wet. Do you know that it would be very uncomfortable for a woman to change her clothes or put on makeup for you, but you end up not touching her? Ying Ying'er turned a lipstick in her palm and looked at Subai. I can go change my clothes now if you want. Forget it, it's getting cold. Stop changing clothes all the time. You said you got a new batch of toys. Haha, I'm quite interested in this, Subai said. This is the truth. Ying Ying'er is really attracted to her. Subai's experience was from the last time I gave Subai a sexual asphyxiation psychotherapy experience. Ying Ying'er shook her head pretending to be disappointed. It really hurts someone's heart. You won't even eat it when I offer it to you. Do you have to strip yourself clean and then put that thing on you with your mouth? Are you willing? Although her words were full of resentment, Ying Ying'er still reached out and opened the curtain of the office, revealing the true appearance of her studio. Obviously, she was also very interested in her new toy, even because if Subai is willing to try, she can have more fun. After all, when treating the rest of her clients, she really spent a lot of energy to be careful about whether her clients were well enough to eat and whether it would lead to a heart attack or other sudden death. However, Subai is different. This man has such a strong body and strong ability to withstand pressure, which is unprecedented among all Ying Ying'er's customers. In him, Ying Ying'er can give full play to herself and practice herself. which is equivalent to the excitement of Fatty discovering the Preachine Formation underground in Tibet. The bed of this bed is made of bulletproof tempered glass, with conductors designed by myself on both sides, as well as oxygen masks and other things. I think, if I were just the pull tab from the last time you came here, and the whip and rope, you probably have no interest in trying it again. This time, they are all new things. You are my first guest, you will take my first time. Subai came over, stretched out his hand and touched the bed, then looked at the densely packed instruments on both sides of the bed, and said with some confusion, "The gimmick is enough, but your treatment of relieving people's inner pressure and releasing negative emotions, the rest, it really doesn't matter whether you are high or low, the key is whether you have made progress. No props or equipment play a greater role in this kind of treatment than Ying herself. Her every move is the real key, opening the customer's heart and allowing the customer to release the pressure deep in their heart. Release it? I won't disappoint you. I have been meditating for the past 6 months, Ying replied, then she slightly bent her knees and made a please gesture. So, Mr. Su, are you willing to lie down on the bed and accept my services? Subai didn't speak, but slowly took off his coat. Expose your upper body, Ying said as she picked up a few wire-like things beside the bed. These things are meant to pierce into your body. Subai didn't say anything to object. He silently took off his shirt and lay down on it. There should be a heating device in the bed, so he didn't feel cold. Instead, he felt very comfortable and enjoyable. It seems that Ying is not opening a psychotherapy studio with the theme of sexual asphyxia but a foot massage parlor. At least, Subai was in a very relaxed state, without any tension, because Subai knew that this woman could not pose any threat to him, so he could calm down and experience it carefully. Do other customers also need to penetrate like this? Subai asked while lying on the bed. Aren't you particular about not causing trauma and trying your best to cause virtual stimulation to the body to achieve the therapeutic effect? Others who play like this will definitely die or be disabled, but you are different. You can hold on and bear it. Ying licked her sexy lips, and then pierced the wires into Subai's in the skin. She then pulled down the oxygen mask and covered Subai's mouth and nose. What is transported here is not oxygen, but slightly toxic gas, which can inhibit your brain thinking to a certain extent. Effect. For outsiders, this is a murder, or at least a euthanasia scene, but for Ying it is a game, a hearty game, and for Subai, this is the same as the night going to a massage parlor near home makes no difference. Let's start. Ying pressed the switches one by one, and the bed began to descend, and then began to flip over. Subai's body turned downwards, and a feeling of weightlessness began to come from the body. Then, the electric current began to slowly travel through Subai's body. Nor did he hesitate to breathe the slightly poisonous gas. You are very tired now, really tired, but you can't rest, and you shouldn't rest. Now, tell me where you want to go, and I will guide you there. Ying gently opened the oxygen mask a little so that she could hear Subai's words clearly. Hospital, the hospital more than 20 years ago. Subai said. Hospital, okay, where is the hospital? The specific location. Ying lay on Subai and whispered softly. Delivery room, pregnant woman, delivery. Subai said these 3 words. Okay, let's go there. I'll take you with me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 485. The walls are glowing with smoky yellow, and the whiteness can only be an adjective that is known but cannot be found here. The smell of disinfectant is so pungent and unpleasant. The nurses coming and going, wearing white clothes with obvious wrinkles and stains, are in a hurry. They are very busy and their welfare is very low. Therefore, they are not in a good mood and speak loudly, just like the aunties selling vegetables on the street. The doctor kept going in and out of several wards, with a touch of anxiety on his face but also a kind of calmness, especially when the family members stuffed the red envelopes into the doctor's pocket. The doctor's face showed the compassion of a medical doctor. The heart is revealed even more clearly. In the corridor, most of them are patients wearing work clothes. They are workers from several state-owned factories nearby. You just appeared in a hospital like this. Subai kept relaxing and suppressing his counterattack against the physical discomfort. He couldn't counterattack because Ying couldn't bear one of his counterattacks. Moreover, it seemed that it was due to excitement. After ruling out the idea of having sex at the beginning, Subai immediately recalled the feeling of being seduced by Ying's words last time when she received treatment. She saw a certain scene in her memory. Even she seemed to have forgotten that memory, but Ying could let people find it in this way. Even if she couldn't find it, she would create another one similar to it. In the hypnotic environment, you can then put your unknown memories into it. For Subai, there is a memory that he still cannot understand and finds incredible. That is, in the world of punishment stories, the broadcast set up an illusion for himself. In that illusion, the other two people, it was the character weakness that was caught by the broadcast and exploited to successfully defeat them. However, because Subai had no flaws in his character and there was nothing known to happen, Subai was an obvious person who could defeat him. Flaw, and therefore, the broadcast set up a scene for Subai that Subai did not expect. Old hospital. Delivery room. Pregnant women. Own parents. Myself in another woman's belly. What does all of this mean? Is it a real event recorded by the broadcast, or is it a scene fabricated by the broadcaster at all costs to influence Subai? Because both the former and the latter make sense for the existence of radio. The former is because all listeners are the eyes and ears of the radio. What the listeners are doing can actually be felt by the radio. The latter is because the radio's control and kneading of people's hearts and the creation of illusions must have reached a point that makes the listeners unbelievable. If it really intends to make you fail and be knocked down in the illusion, it can absolutely weaving a story without any regard for logic or facts. This treatment was just a whim, so Subai didn't intend to get the final answer here with the spirit of inquiring, but it was always good to give it a try. As Ying described it over and over again, Subai felt that his vision began to blur. Gradually, the old hospital corridor appeared in front of him. The ward doors on both sides were still old-fashioned blue wooden boards. All around, there was a pungent smell. The smell of disinfectant and the densely cracked and wrinkled tiles on the floor gave people a very uncomfortable feeling. Maybe it's because of difficulty breathing, or maybe the trace amount of poisonous gas is playing a role, or it's more likely that the feeling from the last time I entered the scene has been regained. Subai felt that his chest hurt so much, so depressed, and the scenes around him seemed to be shaking and shaking. Subai couldn't even stand firmly on his feet. It's here, it's really here, it's still here. Really? Is it effective? This Ying is really a talent. That ward should be at the corner at the end of the corridor. Yes, I remember it correctly. You are in pain, you are confused, you are at a loss, but in order to pursue the answer in your heart, you will still keep moving forward. Even if you stagger, there is still no way to stop you from finding the truth. Ying's voice came again. Her ability to understand people's hearts has really reached a superb level. She is not a listener, but with the identity and qualifications of an ordinary person, it is really scary to raise herself to this level. If she becomes a listener in the future, her accumulation and talent will be limitless. However, for the vast majority of the audience, pulling an ordinary person to become an audience is not as simple as hello, me, and everyone becoming gods together. It is tantamount to pulling someone into a pit of fire. Ying's guess was good. Subai was indeed looking for the truth and exploring something. The fatigue in his body kept coming, but Subai still gritted his teeth, supported the wall with one hand, and continued to move forward. This is a dream, also like an illusion, but in short, it is not very stable. Subai doesn't know how long he can persist in this illusion, and how long Yang Ying can maintain this illusion, so now, he can only cherish time. The person who constructed this illusion was not a spiritual enhancer, but Yang Ying who succeeded with her own hypnosis skills and the stimulation of the body by equipment and props. It was just a trick that could not be considered a good idea. But close. 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 Yes, it is this door, indeed it is this door. Subai leaned against the wall to maintain his balance, and then pushed open the ward door with his hand. The door to the ward was pushed open, but when Subai turned sideways and looked inside, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. There were 3 beds in the ward, and there was only a woman lying on one of the beds. Beside the woman's bed, there were several doctors and nurses lying, as if they were asleep and unconscious. As for the woman's stomach, a crack was cut open, and the blood was solidified. There was no danger of major bleeding. The wound had been specially treated, and her life was safe. But, where did the child in that woman's belly go? Where did he go? Where did you go? The screen began to tremble continuously. Apparently, Subai's emotional fluctuations began to stimulate his instinctive reaction. Once Subai's instinctive emergency response was made, the wires on Ying Ying's bed and even the entire office would be unable to escape. Spread. You need to relax, you need to relax yourself, relax yourself. Any pressure and negative emotions have no meaning to you now. What you are looking for is the truth, the secrets in your own memory and heart, and not just for an emotional outlet at this time. You must learn to be restrained, and you must be restrained. I don't know what you saw, but I can feel your shocked emotions at this time, and I can also discover the secret hidden deep in your heart. However, past experience tells me that when you are emotionally overwhelmed, the truth is often at your fingertips. Yang Ying's words continued to reach Subai's ears at this time. She was trying her best to maintain the stability of Subai and the stability of the hypnotic state she created for Subai. She knew that Subai, I don't want to wake up at this time, and I don't want to give up at this time, but this man is really terrifying and too powerful. He has put down all his defenses and even actively caters to himself, but I am still so tired trying to maintain this hypnotic state or that. Subai only felt that the picture seemed to be much more stable than before. The shock and fluctuating emotions in his heart seemed to be calmed down at this time, as if there were waves of spring breeze blowing him constantly. What do you have around you? A window, a door, or a manhole cover? Yang Ying asked. Door. Then close this door, exit, and then open the other doors next to it. Maybe the truth is hidden next door. Good. Subai closed the ward door with difficulty and took a few steps back. He began to look around subconsciously and found that next door was not a ward, but a public toilet. Bathroom. Subai said. What? Yang Ying asked breathlessly, then just go in and take a look. Go in and take a look. On the other hand, Yang Ying was also thinking about what the bathroom meant in psychological suggestions. Yes, from the very beginning, Yang Ying regarded the hospitals, pregnant women, delivery rooms, etc. that Subai mentioned as psychological hints and metaphors, just like Duke Zhou interpreting dreams. What does it mean, or what is the sign? Subai walked into the bathroom. For a moment, he suddenly felt so cold that his whole body began to tremble. Yang Ying will never know what Subai saw at this time. In the bathroom, there was a man and a woman standing. The backs of 2 men and women, one is Subai's father, the other is Subai's mother. It turns out that the child was so ugly when he was born. His skin was all wrinkled. It was so ugly. He didn't look like me at all, Subai's mother said in disgust. It's indeed a bit dirty, with blood all over his body, Subai's father agreed. Then, Subai's father threw the palm-sized baby in his hand directly into the bathroom sink, then turned on the faucet, letting the cold tap water hit the baby, wash him clean first. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 486. Throw a newborn baby into the sink, turn on the faucet and rinse with cold water. The baby kept crying, which obviously caused him great pain. Yes, as a newborn baby, how could it not be painful? The screams and cries did not make the man and woman show the slightest expression. In fact, they lacked even a little bit of compassion. The two of them seemed to be looking at the person who was still there as if they were a burden. Screaming baby. This scene is so familiar. Subai suddenly thought that when he first met the little guy, he seemed to have thrown the little guy into the water tank and asked him to clean himself. As a result, the little guy swam in the water tank and had a great time. However, the little guy was a born soul boy, but he was not. His heartbreaking cries when he was hit by the cold water in the pool made Subai feel a little uncomfortable and could not breathe. Turn out to be. The cold feeling that hit me all over my body came from here. Hey, just give it a little boost, but don't really kill it. Could it be that if you kill me, I'll have another baby with you? I'm quite willing. Just you. You also want me to get pregnant and give birth to your child, so save it. The woman stretched out her hand and patted the man's face gently. You take it back to deal with it first. At least meet our relatives in the real world, such as your father, such as my mother, so that they can at least know that a grandchild has been born. Do we really want to live with him? The man said helplessly. I have a solution. The picture seemed to be completely chaotic at this time. Subai felt that he was so floating. He was almost floating on the clouds. He was surrounded by a vast expanse of white. This whiteness carried a kind of boundless despair, just like a huge hand directly grabs you and lifts you to the wall, trying to strangle you to death. The feeling of suffocation comes from all directions, like a prisoner exiled from the world, lonely, lonely, still lonely. Subai didn't feel sad because of the scene he saw before, nor did he look like he was greatly shocked. After all, Subai actually guessed some of the things in the fantasy world in the story last time. Well, this time, it was just confirmed. However, there was one thing that Subai didn't know yet. How could he see the scene at that time? At that time, I was still a baby. Could I already remember so many things and details? Besides, Subai slowly raised his head and looked at the sky around him. He knew that this was a dream, and he knew that he was still in a hypnotic state. However, he had given up suppressing himself. However, why, I haven't woken up yet. At Lao Fang's house, the fat man and the little guy had just finished lunch. They were lying on the sofa and watching TV. At this time, the fat man's cell phone suddenly rang. He looked at the message, shook his head, and settled the little guy. He shouted to Jixiang and walked out of the house, but he didn't take a taxi or walk far, and stood at the edge of the field at the far intersection. A motorcycle drove over from there, not very fast, and stopped in front of the fat man. The other party took off his helmet, revealing the face of a woman. The woman was not very good looking, and could even be said to be a bit ugly. She had a hare lip and many scars on her face. This kind of appearance seemed to be unfriendly to her both from nature and nurture. Why are you here for me? The fat man asked coldly. Obviously, even the fat man, who was known as a social butterfly in the audience circle, was not very interested in this female audience. I missed you, so I came to take a look. Why, can't I? The woman raised her head, looked at the old Fang's house in front of her, and said with a smile, this country villa looks pretty good, and it's protected by formations. You found yourself a good nest. You don't have to call me, just climb over the wall and come in to find me, Fatty said. In that way, I was killed by the formation, So you don't have to worry about it, right? Haha, Zhang I remember how mean you were when you knelt at my feet and begged me to let me go to bed with you. Now I feel that now that you have achieved great success, you feel that you are a senior person, so you start looking down on others, right? I've given you enough things, it's worth putting you to sleep 70 or 80 times, don't be dissatisfied. I'm not satisfied, the woman pointed at herself. Okay, I'll stop talking now. I will never be satisfied with your Zhang things. Whatever you have, I want. You, the things that belong to me are my things. Neuropathy. The fat man turned around, preparing to ignore this woman. Zhang stop here. Did you get the vampire blood you said you wanted to give me last time? The woman shouted. Can you please stop talking about this in such a big humming way? The fat man looked around with some guilt. Fortunately, he didn't see the black cat on the wall again. Those drops of blood are not mine, but my friend's. When I promised you that I could help you get a drop, it was because he owed me several favors at that time. I asked him for 1 drop of the 3 drops of blood, or even 2 drops should be enough, and he will give it to me, but now it has changed, do you understand? Oh, is he not going to return the favor to you? The woman asked with a mocking tone. No, something happened. Because of my selfishness and cowardice, I almost killed them all. The fat man took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a heavy puff. So, I'm looking for something to share with him now. I went to exchange it, but I couldn't find it for the time being. My friend is quite special, and there are relatively few things that can impress him. In fact, he doesn't even exchange or enhance it from the WeChat store, so for him, the story points are different from those in the game machine room. There is no difference in game currency. You told me that he, like me, also mutated due to bloodline issues and could not be directly upgraded from the WeChat store, but how could he become so strong? There must be something you haven't told me, there must be something you haven't given me. The fat man turned around, grabbed the woman's chest and collar and threw her from the motorcycle to the ground. Then he pointed angrily at his face and said, Mame, you don't know what kind of person Zhang am. I'm warning you, don't push me too hard. If I push you too hard, I'll kill you directly. It's not like I can't do anything treacherous. Okay, you do it, Zhang when you were poisoned, if I hadn't used my own body to detoxify you, would you have survived until now? My bloodline has been contaminated, mutated, and cannot be redeemed. You yourself also know what this means in the story world. It means that as the difficulty of the story world increases, if my strength is not effectively improved, my ending will be, can only wait for death. Zhang all of this is your fault, it's all you who hurt me, it's all you owe me. The woman shouted hysterically. The fat man gritted his teeth. I said I would try my best to make amends, and I have been trying to make amends, but please don't push yourself too hard. I'm begging you, okay? I don't want to be forced to kill you in the end. After all, when you decided to save me, I was really touched. I must get that drop of blood, otherwise when the broadcast resumes, I really have no confidence in relying on luck to survive. Since there is no way to redeem the enhanced mutant bloodline directly from the WeChat store, then I can be like him, a bloodline enhancement. Mame, you are not him. What he can do, you may not be able to do. Fatty said earnestly, listen to me. Anyway, there is still a month before the broadcast resumes. I can think of a way. If you really know, The fat man suddenly thought of the bronze box. The bronze box was taken from Subai when he and Subai met for the first time. After that, the two of them got to know each other better, but Subai wisely did not mention the box again. The fat man naturally didn't mention it, but judging from the current situation, the only thing he could use to exchange a drop of blood with Subai seemed to be the bronze box. That box was placed in Chengdu by himself. How could he have to do it recently? Find a time to go back to Chengdu and get it back. You have a solution, right? Mame looked at the fat man with a hint of hope. The fat man stretched out his hand to rub his face and nodded slowly. Mame, this is the last time. When I give you that drop of blood, we won't owe each other anything. Okay, sure, I know. Mame got up again and put on her helmet. I am in Shanghai right now and will not go back to Chengdu. I am waiting for your good news. After saying that, Mame rode her motorcycle out of Fatty's sight. The fat man spread his palms and pursed his lips. It's over, we don't owe each other, haha, how can it end, how can we be free and easy and don't owe each other? The fat man knew that this time, he would exchange the drop of blood with Subai and give it to her. However, this was the last time he felt at ease. No one is satisfied, not even the saints, but what the fat man wants is just himself. Peace of mind, when she comes to demand him again, he can have peace of mind, kill her. By the way, why hasn't Dabai come back yet? The fat man realized at this time that it was almost evening. Why hadn't Subai come back yet? If he didn't come back, he would at least give him a call. His son was still there. At home. At the moment, Yingyinger also felt inexplicable. She suddenly discovered that Subai's body, which had been getting heated under her own teasing, was slowly becoming colder. In fact, this coldness was getting worse. Even he didn't dare to get too close. Subai's upper body was naked. In the pocket of his lower body, a small jade bottle was cracked. One of the 3 drops of essence and blood originally stored in it rolled down and stuck to Subai's skin. Then, slowly blended in.